Steelers fans, Matty P, Shannon White, another episode of the Steelers Global Perspective. Now, Shannon, we got the Super Bowl this weekend. You've kind of got to be living under a rock, literally internationally, to not know about the Super Bowl, right? There are people messaging me like, Matty, what are we doing for the Super Bowl? What's your tip for the Super Bowl? What's your bet? All this sort of thing. What's your parlay for the game? All these sorts of things. But for the Steelers, they're watching two teams that they've played quite regularly, or at least in the 49ers, they played them this last season. Week one, got brutalized. I call it brutalized by them. They manhandled. It was an absolute smackdown. I know you like your wrestling. And so there are some interesting things. Now, there are teams that make the Super Bowl each year that get there in weird and interesting ways. There's still a level of success to it. They're not everything the Steelers can go out and replicate. There's different systems and all the rest of it. But there are some things that the Steelers can take or learn from these two teams as they enter the Super Bowl. And it is interesting because you think about the Chiefs and people, that are casual fans of the NFL will sit there and say, oh, well, they're in there because they've got Patrick Mahomes. It's like, well, no, actually, it's the young investments on defense, which is the reason why they're in there, right? And we're starting to see that play out for the Steelers when you think about guys like, Porter and Benton, particularly that they've started to bring into the mix, maybe even Trice, those sorts of things, the draft class we're going to have coming up, Nick Herbig's, all the rest of it. So, and you can say that about any team, there's lots of drafting and all that sort of thing. Then you look at the game team like the 49ers that are very well-rounded, that it's a bit like, I'm not going to compare Arthur Smith directly to Kyle Shanahan because there are very differences in how they do things, but the utilization of the run, the utilization of people across the run and the pass game, the versatility, those sorts of things, bigger body wide receivers, big guys that can block, and most not by bigger bodied, I mean also guys that are short in stature, which is interesting because I know we're going to have a quick show out this weekend around some of the Senior Bowl guys and, guys like Malachi Corley fit that mix, a bit similar to Sky Moore, all those good things. But I guess, what are some of the things that stand out to you about this game that Steel fans should be looking out for as an example, like as we now go through an off season, as the team starts to change, and what even Steel players should be sitting there watching the Super Bowl going, hey, there's some things that wouldn't it be great if we could do that? Even to the extent of what can Kenny Pickett take away from Mahomes and Brock Purdy from this game that he can start thinking about and start working towards, because they've got a whole off season now that they can work towards some of these good traits and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, well, Kenny Pickett can look and envy that Brock Purdy was able to go to an organization that's well coached, a great offensive scheme in place, great offensive line, skill position players with the defense. Brock Purdy to me reminds me a lot of what Ben stepped into. And, now Ben is a much more talented, a freakish athlete, whereas Brock Purdy's more like Kenny Pickett. Yeah. But you've seen if you're smart and you're efficient and you're adaptable, like Brock Purdy has proven to be, you can be extremely successful. And he was in the running for the MVP award. And so, who would have thought that for Mr. Irrelevant? But in the right system, and it's all about fit. I believe that last year, had he not been injured in the NFC Championship game, I think they would have represented the NFC in the Super Bowl.
I would just say as well, I have to get it out there. Yeah. I was on Brock Purdy in that draft because of his production at Iowa. I had said that this guy should be a 4th round pick, and everyone told me I was an absolute fool.
But you got to watch him because of the Big 12, and you seen it. I mean, he went out there with some Iowa State teams that were nowhere near as talented as Oklahoma, as Texas, and he kept them in games and won games.
And year in, year out. And he was so used to not being the guy, but used to working with the players around him. And that literally, they've just gone, thank you, Brock Purdy. Install you, plug and play in San Francisco. That's how we're doing it here.
And he's always been very cool. Even when he was getting chased in them games and Iowa State looked like they're going to get blown out, he stayed calm. and he kept his composure, and he has more mobility than people realize. And he showed against the Lions in the championship game. So, it goes to show you don't have to have a Mahomes or a Josh Allen or, Aaron Rodgers. You got to have the team. If you got balance and you got the right scheme and players to fit the scheme, you can have a quarterback who's just, efficient and effective. He doesn't have to be exceptional.
Yeah.
And so that's hope for all the Steeler fans. We all can look at this and say, well, I mean, look at Kansas City. I mean, they're not the same team that won the Super Bowl 3 years ago. Yeah. That was Tyreek Hill and Kelsey and Harden and all them explosive plays down the field. And they were on defense. And then the next year, the offensive line wasn't very good and got Holmes halfway killed, and they lost in the Super Bowl. And then you seen them rebuild that foundation, offense and defensive line, and they really focused on the secondary, another area the Steelers need to pay attention. And now the defense has carried them this year. If you look at the Kansas City Chiefs, their defense has been the consistent all year long. The offense, they lead the league in drop passes. Mahomes ain't putting up the monster numbers. Now, he's a winner. He wins in the end of the game. So if he has to scramble or hit a big pass, he does it. But it's not the offense carrying the Chiefs. It's the defense.
Yeah, and to me, that's the thing that the Steelers as an organization can take from the Chiefs is the rebuilding, remodeling while you're on the go is kind of the thing, right? And I think we've kind of seen that with the Steelers in the offense in terms of they brought in a lot of, over the last 4 or 5 years, top draft picks on offense. While the defense gets older, you've got to be able to consistently remodel and play to your strengths, right? And that's why, to me, getting the offense right this offseason is so crucial, because we're hitting a bit of an equilibrium here with another good draft class and some actual money to spend in free agency, where they can set themselves up this year for some level of a run, but put themselves in a very good position for 2025. Now, I've talked about that on this channel for probably about 6 to 9 months now, is the 2023 season is about proving you can win a playoff game or getting done freaking close, and Kenny Pickett's development. Well, Kenny Pickett's development, we didn't hit that mark. Failed, right? Or not, no pass mark on that. Well, jury's out. Go to the playoffs, put up a decent fight against a Bills team with a heap of injuries and keep spots. That was probably the best we could have hoped for in the context of this season. I don't think we're behind in where I think the Steelers need to be for 2025. I don't think we're behind in that at all. But there's a lot of work to do. Where through what I think is phase one, and we just past phase one. But I'm very excited about phase two. And the other thing I wanted to talk about just quickly, because I got to
say this. What I so admire what Kansas City did. They reinvented their team while they paid their franchise quarterback. And the way they did it is Tyreek Hill, but they didn't give him away, but they let him go. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. They did a hard line on Chris Jones last offseason.
Yep.
They franchise tag. They realize that you're paying your franchise quarterback. Now, the better that quarterback is, the more you got to pay him. And obviously, Mahomes is the best. So, but they've been able to.
Mahomes looks cheap compared to what.
Now, but not when they first signed him. But they were smart. No. They signed him for so long that you knew that eventually he's going to be a bargain. Now, eventually he'll be like, I need to be paid more. So there'll be some readjustments in there.
And if I'm the Chiefs, I go to a team that looks really, really good all over. That'll take the hit, and I move him on, and I get 5 years of first round draft picks, because it's not like the NBA where you get limitations on your.
But
picks.
They do. It will give them options.
That's what I'm saying. You can move him on.
Exactly. But you have to admire what they've been able to accomplish. And it's kind of like the Steelers winning 4 Super Bowls in 6 years with the steel curtain.
Yeah.
And they would have won 6 if it hadn't been for some terrible injuries to superstars in back-to-back years there.
Yeah.
But if you watch that team, it started out as a defensive juggernaut. And by the end of that dynasty, it was an offensive showcase with Bradshaw, Swan, Stallworth, Harris. But the defense had gotten older and wasn't quite as good. But they were adaptable. And that's what you have to say right now. I don't know how long this Chiefs thing is going to keep going, but they have been smart with their draft picks. They've been smart with the guys they choose to let go, and they've replaced them with more affordable guys. Like this year, think about it, Drew Tranquil. They picked him up because nobody else really – I wanted the Steelers to get him.
Yeah.
If they picked him up as kind of an afterthought, give him a prove-it deal, and he has a chance now to win a Super Bowl. He's been a vital part of that defense.
He's only like 2.3 million.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's smart. But that goes back to your GM and your money guys. Well, that gives me hope because Khan and Weidl are great at this.
Well, and this goes back to the whole...
Colbert wasn't.
Yeah, and this is when you talk about the Chris Jones thing, when the Chiefs drafted Greg Rousseau.
Yeah.
Greg Rousseau, is that their pass rush? I always get him mixed up with the guy at the Bills. There was the same draft that they were both in. I think it's Rousseau.
No, it ain't Rousseau. Oh crap! Caracas? No.
Is it Calvinitis? Is that the guy?
Calvinitis, maybe that's it.
Yeah. They're the same draft, and they're both 4-3 defensive ends. I always get them mixed up. I'll be talking about the Bills, and I get them mixed up every time. But anyway, when they drafted, Calvin. I'm gonna read his name properly. I'm married to a Greek. I'm not gonna miss.
I think it's Calvinitis. Yes.
Yeah. So when they drafted him, everyone went kind of thing. Well, Calvinitis. Yeah. So when they drafted him, everyone went, well, hang on, like, do they really need this piece? And I'm sitting there going, yeah, they do. And he was drafted 30th overall. It came off the back of them, making obviously the AFC Championship game and not going all the way. And I just thought, this is very smart because this gives you a cheap edge rusher. And that gave them the ability to sit there and move on from a Chandler Jones. And so, Chris Jones, sorry. So, to me, it's interesting because we brought in a Benton this year.
Yeah.
Right? They could go D-line, and I think it's not going to be first round, I think, unless a guy really falls. Like that guy from Illinois could be interesting. I think his last name's Newton. But the second round, you go get another D-line, right? And you do that. Like, they're the sorts of moves. Even when they got Trent McDuffie, people were a bit like, oh, now they did hit. Like, they got in Gay and Bolton. Like, Bolton's another good example where a lot of Chiefs fans were like, oh, no, we need to be getting X player, on offense for Patrick Mahomes. It's like, no, get cheap so you continue to pay a couple of playmakers on offense.
Who's the guy?
We walk away with a Bolton in this draft. Oh, my God.
Who's the other inside linebacker they got out of Wisconsin?
Leo Chenal. I loved Leo Chenal coming out. I talked about him.
Yeah.
So I was blue in the face on this channel. I talked about the fact that for his size, he'd had something like, when he came out, people didn't expect him to pack the weight on at the NFL.
Yeah.
And he had like some crazy red zone interceptions playing basically like box safety, like coming out of college. The draft dudes were so high on him, it wasn't funny. And I talk about him and people go, this guy's like a 6th round pick. I'm like,
yeah. No. Willie Gay is a free agent after the Super Bowl, but they got him. So again, they got leverage. The thing about teams like the 49ers and the Chiefs, and I'm hoping the Steelers can emulate it, and because you mentioned it with Khan and Weidl, is they're 2 steps ahead.
Yeah.
They don't wait till when they're in dire need. They think and they look down the road 2 steps ahead.
I mean, Leo Chenal had 65 tackles this year, 3 sacks, 8 tackles for a loss, 7 quarterback hits, a pass defense, like huge. Huge. Like, we'd be happy with that out of a starter. He's really
definitely. Please.
So to wrap this one up, because we've still got we've still got more content coming this weekend for everyone on Steelers coaches and maybe even a little bit on some NFL draft prospects and an update there. Because Steelers have hired, as you and I record this, 3 new coaches. My thing that I'm interested in, and I saw this on Twitter a couple of weeks back, and it's right. Like I knew it already, but it was just really interesting to me that someone pointed it out like this. The 49ers wide receivers block like nothing else, and that's the secret to their run game. And of the course of this season, you mentioned to me Jennings was available, and he is from them. But if they win a Super Bowl, he'll get the Super Bowl top up. I don't know if the Steelers can afford that, not afford that. But
he's a 3. He's a wide receiver 3.
Totally. So, but someone will offer him too money to go somewhere else like that if he scores a touchdown. Whatever. But I guess my point being is we heard a lot about blocking, and there's a particular statement around, blocking in a particular situation and with Warren and Pickens and all that sort of stuff. But then Pickens got back to blocking. Are the Steelers capable? I'm not going to ask the question, Steelers capable of getting to this level, because that's a multi-year proposition.
Yeah.
But if you look at the top 3 on the Steelers right now, I'm putting Allen Robinson aside. In my mind, he's already out the door. He hopefully packed up his locker. Bye-bye. I don't mind bringing him back on a vet minimum. I don't hate that.
I don't want him back.
I don't know why you would, but I don't know why you would. It doesn't do anything. You need to get.
I don't want him back.
No, guys. But you got Austin. You've got obviously Deontay. You've got Pickens. So do they have any hope in hell of getting even halfway in terms of the blocking capability of what the 49ers have got? Because if not, the reason I ask this question is, if not, to me, you've got to look at that trait as well as a really good route runner in this offseason, whether it's draft or free agency.
Well, me and you talked about a guy after the show last week, which we're going to talk about on our next segment, that I am very impressed with, that you mentioned to me. And so the answer right now is no. Pickens will have to learn. And for the good news is we got a new wide receiver coach, which again, we'll talk about in the next segment. But it needed to happen because Pickens is going to grow up. He's going to grow up. He's going to be more consistent. He's going to give more consistent effort. Deontay Johnson is a terrible fit with Arthur Smith's offense. He is not big enough. He's not physical enough, and he doesn't like to block. He likes to get in the way. The only other receiver guaranteed to be back is Calvin Austin III, and he's more of a smaller gadget guy. He's not going to be a good blocker. So the Steelers have got to get at least 2 receivers. I'm saying 1 in free agency, 1 in the draft this year to have what they need out of Arthur Smith. And so they're going to have Arthur Smith teaching them. They're going to have another guy coming over as an offensive assistant that knows Smith's offense. He'll be teaching them, and the new wide receiver coach. So I expect to see a much more consistent effort blocking out of the Steelers receivers next year. Yeah. That makes total sense to me. Well, that's going to wrap up this part of the Steelers Global Perspective for this weekend. Quick pick. Who are you going for? I'm going KC. Who do you think is going to win? I'm going KC because I don't want the 6. I don't want the 6 Super Bowls with the 49ers. It doesn't matter to Dave Schofield from Stillkurt Network. He said that on the Scobro show. It matters to Matty P. It don't matter to me either. Anything that lights a fire under the Roonies and makes them get off of this non-losing season streak. But I think the Niners are going to win. Interesting. I like Mahomes in the clutch. Last year I was on the Eagles. I was like, totally the Eagles are going to win this thing. But, there we go. All right. Well, that's Matty P with Shannon White. As always, go Steelers.